Revenue growth is no longer just about hitting sales targets. It's about creating a seamless alignment across all revenue-facing teams, sales, marketing, and customer success, all under a unified strategy. The key to this alignment is a well-executed RevOps and go-to-market approach that not only breaks down silos, but also enhances visibility, coordination, and data-driven decision-making across the organization. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Revenue Lounge. I am your host, Randy Likas, and in today's episode, we will explore how aligning your RevOps strategy can drive revenue growth. We'll dive into the challenges of unifying different engagement metrics, the role of data in ensuring team alignment, and the tools that can help optimize the process. Joining me today is John Hultman. John is the Chief Revenue Officer at Druva. John has spent his entire career in technology sales and sales leadership positions. Prior to joining Druva, John spent 18 months at Cohesity, where he acted as the Senior Vice President of North American Sales and Head of Global Channels. He was accountable for go-to-market strategy, growth, and worldwide pipeline generation. And previous to that, he spent almost 19 years at Dell in various sales and sales leadership roles. John, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
John, tell us a little bit about your current role at Druva, and for those who might not know much about the company, maybe just a little bit in terms of what Druva does.
Yeah, so I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Druva. I've been here approaching a year. We're a cloud data protection, data security company in a highly competitive segment of the market. We're 100% SaaS based, so we differentiate in that respect to many of our peers.
So what made you take the job, John, a year ago? What got you excited about the position?
Well, I've always wanted to be a CRO, so that was obviously one of the aspects of it. The second one was having broader responsibility and accountability for the overall business rather than just running a sales function was certainly of interest. I've done that in prior roles. That's what kind of gets me motivated and inspired.
Yeah, so we talked about the different go-to-market functions, right? Customer success, sales, marketing, all rolling into CRO. Do you have oversight in all those roles?
Not marketing, but everything else.
Okay, great. Out of curiosity, what's been the biggest surprise over the past year taking the role? Anything that you'd like to share or interesting?
Well, I just need more hours in the day. I mean, there's just a lot of things that you get pulled into day to day, and you have to just really learn how to delegate and use your time very judiciously, or the day just gets away from you and you just burn yourself out. So time management has probably been the biggest thing that I've had to work on.
Yeah. Are you guys all remote? I know you have an office in the Bay Area, but your sales team's all across the U.S.?
Globally, yeah.
Cool.
Probably 2/3 of our sellers that are in territory in the United States, and then in the major markets in Europe and Asia as well.
Gotcha. And about how big is your team globally?
We have about 170 sellers globally.
Great. Fantastic. So John, let's talk a little bit about some of these silos that exist between different go-to-market functions that I think ultimately under your leadership, you're trying to break some of those things down, right? Create a cohesive strategy. But when you think about the different functions, typically what are some of the traps that make those functions siloed, and then how do you bring them all together under one strategy?
Yeah, I guess one of the examples I thought about was everybody has a tendency to have their own set of KPIs that they're managed to. I'll use the SDR function as an example. Everybody kind of looks at their metrics vertically, right? I'm green, but you're not getting to the outcome that you want. And so what I found really helpful is to work backwards from the answer and kind of flip things horizontally and look at where the breaks are, where the friction points are, and then you can point to where the problem is to solve that. Ultimately, the outcome is what matters, and sometimes you can have everybody cheering success in their vertical pillar, but you're not getting to where you want to go.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense if marketing is saying, hey, I hit my pipeline gen goal, but we missed revenue goals, right? Yeah. So I guess in thinking about that and trying to align those metrics, right? What are some of the things that you look for? Is it around pipeline and revenue? If you think about the KPIs or the OKRs of your direct reports, how do you bring that all together under one strategy?
Well, I'll just use that example as one, right? Ultimately, what we care about is marketing-generated bookings, right? And the quantity of the pipeline is one thing, but there's also other key metrics that impact that, because you can have a whole lot of quantity, but if you don't have quality, you're not going to get to the overall bookings number. So you have to set very meaningful, thoughtful metrics that ultimately impact the end goal all along the way. And that really will highlight, I think, where you have problems and where you have disconnects in the system.
And is it so like when you do that and you align those? What are some of the friction points you hear from the different functions, if you do?
Yeah, I mean, the standard one is you hear I don't have enough leads, the quality of the leads aren't good, and so we have scoring mechanisms that we use to determine the validity and quality of the leads. We look at things like how long did it take for the AE to follow up, what are some of the reasons for disengagement when leads drop off or they don't continue to move through the pipeline. We look at how long are opportunities at each stage along the way. And we look for patterns and we look for common issues that we can solve for that aren't overly unique.
Yeah. You know, I'm in Vegas right now for a big customer conference for one of the sales tech vendors. This plus I was talking with someone last week who hosted a roundtable of CROs at B2BMX, and interesting data point that they point out of those CROs in the roundtable, they said that net new meetings, first meetings, are down 30 to 50% year over year. So it's just a hard market right now to get people's attention. Don't know if that's the case for you all, Druva, or not, but looking at this market and the challenge, I think, in generating sort of that those first appointments, what are your thoughts? Are you guys seeing that, and what do you think some of the reasons are?
It's really hard, and I think prospects are inundated with attempts to get their attention, whether it's LinkedIn, cell phone calls, emails, DMs, and eventually it just becomes noise to them. I don't even answer my phone anymore unless I know it's like a recognized number. And so it is getting harder. It's taking more attempts to get quality meetings set up. We are able to grow our meetings, but it takes a lot more work to do it. And at a certain point, you got to start looking at what is my overall CAC on acquiring these customers, right? And look at your different routes to market and say, are there more effective, more cost-efficient ways to gain access to the customers than a traditional MQL, marketing-generated lead system? Because there's a lot that goes into that, right? It's not only the SDRs, it's all the tools and data cleansing and all the other ancillary things that add real cost that ultimately impact that customer acquisition cost.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time looking at that versus like our OEM relationship with Dell, our channel go-to-market motion, our MSP motion. They all have different kind of pros and cons and different cost implications.
Yeah. As a data security platform, I'm sure that your sales are pretty complex, right? You've got multiple stakeholders that are involved in the decision, probably fairly long sales cycles to get the different folks aligned. There's a big trend right now that Forrester talks quite a bit about, and a lot of other people are leaning in right now around this idea of moving away as MQL as a single buyer to now looking at buying groups and looking for the signals across multiple buyers that can identify that maybe something is heating up at the time. What's your perspective on that? Is that kind of what you guys are seeing as well?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ABM platforms out there. I've used 6sense in the past, good platform. We're using ZoomInfo right now. It's proving to be a pretty good platform for the cost of value that it delivers. And I think you're right, the buying groups are globally distributed in many cases. People are all over. We found it not only to be very useful around targeting the right people at the right time, which obviously drives better efficiency, but also to understand signals of what may be going on in your existing customers and looking at it as a potential forewarning of a churn that's coming up. And so we're finding a lot of use in the platform. It's early days, but we're moving forward with it.
Just to build on that point, I'll give credit where credit's due, right? So I'm at the 6sense conference right now, and there was some new research that came out that they talked about, and they said that on average there's about 11 buying committee members, right? So it depends on the company, and only one person shows up on an opportunity, right? You look at Salesforce and there's one person. We know there's more people involved, but all those people that come in and out of the deal at different cycles and in different personas that are involved in that don't show up. And so there's a lot of, to your earlier point, a lot of existing signals that exist within the sales and customer success conversations that we're having, especially as we think about expansion, right? As we want to go reach out to new stakeholders that maybe weren't involved in the initial land, right? But we've got to get those new people on board. A lot of signals that exist in those existing conversations. So would just be curious to like, when you think about your expansion motion, and more specifically, I guess I'm asking around customer success. How do you think, what do you look for as far as expansion strategy, new stakeholders need to get aligned? Is that the customer success manager that sort of owns that? Do they work in partnership with the AE? How does that work?
Yeah, we've got a little bit of a unique go-to-market from my experience. And at first I was a little unsure about it when I got here, but I think having almost a year in the model, I'm becoming a believer. I'll use our mid-market segment as an example. We have dedicated hunting teams and we have dedicated farming teams, for lack of a better term. Hunting team, self-explanatory, their job is to go out and get net new logos. They keep them through the first renewal, then they transition to the expansion team. The expansion team's job is to build on what was sold initially, because generally we'll acquire a customer for one or two workloads, but we've got a dozen workloads, plus security, plus all these other things that we can obviously sell to these customers. And it's really the job of the expansion team working with the CSM, potentially a TAM, their SE, the partner, to all surround that customer and drive as broad of adoption and consumption of all of the workloads that Druva offers with those customers wherever possible.
So a lot of times what we'll see, and again, I'm going to just pressure test this against what you're seeing, is lots of people are involved in the initial sale, deal gets landed, right? We start implementing, delivering to the customer. But all those people that were sort of decision makers or influencers in that process go away, and now there's an admin of the tool that our teams work with bi-weekly or whatever that cadence is that they manage. Yet when we look at renewing that contract or expanding that contract, it's difficult to get those other stakeholders back engaged, right? They're not involved in that weekly cadence. So curious, just from your perspective, what's some areas as far as delivering value to keep influential, important stakeholders that maybe were involved earlier or that you need to get to in order to expand?
Yeah, I'd say a couple things. One, our marketing team, I think, does a pretty good job of continuing to keep them informed through digital means, social means, things like that. They may not show up to an event, they may not get on a webinar, but hopefully passively they're consuming the information and understanding what's going on with Druva, even if they're not engaged from our perspective. And then secondly, it's the AE's job, especially in our strategic segment, is to build out a robust account plan, understand who all the key stakeholders are, make sure that they're touching those key decision makers on a regular basis, because they may have disengaged, but they may become re-engaged when another workload comes up that they have a vested interest in. So I think it's strategic account planning 101, but a limited time in the day, and it's probably something that everybody could do better at.
Yeah, well, and I mean, look, you and I both grew up as sellers, and we AEs, sellers, tend to focus on the top accounts we see the most potential, and the others, just based on opportunity, may not touch. So I completely agree. It starts with strategic account planning. It starts with kind of mapping out our potential. Curious though, what's the operating rhythm in order to measure that, right? How do we know how successful? Is it you're generating opportunities and closing revenue, or are you looking at the lagging indicators leading to those things to help make sure that we're actually making progress within those strategic accounts?
Yeah, I think the real thing we look at is their consumption behavior, right? Are they continuing to consume and grow the footprint in the workloads they have? Are they expanding to additional workloads? We have propensity models that we use, kind of AI propensity models that take into consideration 100 plus metrics that look at the overall health and propensity of a customer to either churn or expand. So we look at that. And then we do a customer NPS as well to understand from them directly how are we doing as it relates to your overall engagement. We have quarterly QBRs with our large customers, biannual QBRs with kind of our mid-com type customers, mid-market type customers. And so we try to do our best to stay engaged with them as much as possible and in all possible ways that we can.
I want to just turn a little bit the conversation to data and talk about data. So I think in most organizations, there's no shortage of data, and data sprawl happens across many different systems. But as we think about trying to bring together a cohesive go-to-market strategy across functions, what are the different metrics that you look for in the data that may live in other systems? And I guess, how do you bring it all together to help inform some of that strategy?
So the question is, what are the kind of the key metrics that we look at to understand the health of the business?
Well, yeah. So data lives in many different systems, right?
Yeah.
You've got Salesforce, you've got whatever sales tech solutions that you might be dealing
Yeah.
with. Customer success might have Gainsight, right? But yet
Yeah.
we're trying to deliver around a key, set of metrics across all functions. So we're not operating in silos any longer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you bring it together?
I wouldn't say that we've got it all figured out. So Salesforce is like our customer source of record that everything gets pulled out of, right? It's the core CRM system. We use tools like Sigma, which is probably the closest thing that we use to be an aggregator of all of the other data sources. We use Clary. We use tools like Atrium. Some of them are more open than others and expose APIs where you can aggregate data in certain layers. Some of them don't. So we try to do our best to aggregate as much as we can and really simplify things because, to your point, there's so much data out there right now and there's so many different ways to cut it. I've found both at Druva as well as in my prior company, because it's so readily available and exposed to the sellers and the managers and all that, you get into these arguments about what the facts around the data are, and it could be just like the smallest variable that's different, and they're arguing about something, and they're both right, they're just looking at it differently. So it's not only about bringing it together and simplifying it, but also standardizing on what is the source of truth that we're going to look at for this, and which dashboard specifically are we going to use to do that, and then locking things down and getting everybody focused on that. Otherwise, you spend a lot of time just treading water and spinning, arguing about what the facts are.
Yeah. So ultimately, I think RevOps is probably the team that needs to bring all that data together for you to lead the business. But it's more than just data, right? Like data's data. I'm kind of leading the question here a little bit, but you're probably looking for insights in the business. Like you want your RevOps team to see around corners a little bit. And so, talk to me a little bit about that, if you would. How do you hold your team accountable for not just bringing you the data, but bringing you insights? And what does that look like? What is an insight to you that could help you grow the business?
Yeah, maybe I'll use pipeline as a good example. There's a lot of different ways to look at pipeline. We look at it through a couple different lenses. One, we look at the pipeline that's created in quarter because we know that's going to be our fuel for subsequent quarters. We look at our current quarter pipeline coverage, right? And that's more of an indicator of, do we have enough advanced stage pipeline and total pipeline to get to the number in quarter? And then we look at the next quarter pipeline. So as we're getting into month 2, month 3, we start paying a lot more attention to the next quarter pipeline because we want to enter the next quarter with subsequent pipeline and not be in a constant chase mode. And so our RevOps team, I think, does a really good job of kind of calling out warning signs when we're seeing it, whether it's in a specific geo, a specific team, or even a specific individual. Yeah. And we cut all of those route to market, right? It could be a certain amount of your pipeline that you get from channels, some from OEMs, some from maybe a direct model. And so we want to make sure, number one, in aggregate it's healthy, but are there certain functions that aren't living up to their responsibilities in terms of pipeline generation as well?
So John, curious, as we talked about the different data points that you look for and the insights that you bring from RevOps, can you talk more on the renewal side of things? So when you think about your existing business and protecting the existing business, what strategies have you put in place to make sure that you're seeing ahead of the curve on any risk signals that might exist in the business to protect your revenue? So John, one of the questions I wanted to ask you about is sort of the cadence that you follow for retention and managing that side of the business. As we've been talking about sort of bringing together common metrics across the different functions, what those metrics look like for you on the renewal side. Of course, I'm sure it's GRR and NRR, but what are some of the lagging indicators that you might look for to measure the health of the business and the operating cadence that you expect from the team to make sure they can deliver on the number?
Yeah, I'd say in terms of the metrics, we built, as I mentioned earlier, like an AI propensity model for expand insurance. So that's the dashboard level view of, are we green or red? And it's really different by segment too. So in our enterprise accounts, the expectation is that we're engaged with them on a regular basis. And so the AEs and the SEs are very good about understanding where we're at with the customer and if we're in a good spot or bad spot. Once you deal with thousands of mid-market and smaller customers, you have to rely much more on data, analytics, telemetry, things like that. And so we'll look at their engagement levels, consumption, are they consuming more, how many tickets are they opening, things like that all feed that AI model.
Okay.
And then do they show up to events, things like that, as kind of an indicator. In terms of the cadence, again, it's different, right? We do quarterly QBRs with the big ones where we'll review the health of the business. We'll talk about the renewals. We'll usually start 6 months to 120 days out, and we start working with them on their capacity needs for the next year. It's also a good opportunity to inform them about advancements that we've made, new functionality, new workflows, things like that. With what I call our long tail of our renewals, our smaller customers, it's like a 120-day shot clock where there's an engagement from the AE. If they haven't been engaged, and the renewals rep, they're talking to them about how they're trending, what their needs are for the next year, and then we're driving towards the end of quarter close on that. And we look a lot at not only did we get the renewal or not, but did we get it on time, what value did it come in at, things like that.
Yeah. So are there any engagement signals other than product usage? I guess engagement would be considered our company coming to events. Are there any signals that you see where the alarms go off, like this thing's in trouble? And I guess it will probably vary by segment, but curious, like if there's one telltale sign that you see other than product usage, right? That sort of, gets the hairs on the back of the neck standing up.
Well, like tickets opening, if they're opening a lot of tickets, that's definitely bad. If the consumption starts trending down or it drops off precipitously all of a sudden, we can see, are they downloading data out of our cloud? That might indicate that they're moving it somewhere else. Those are all things that send up flags that something bad is potentially happening here.
Yeah, that's insightful. Thank you. Okay, 2 questions, and then we'll go quickly to our lightning round. One is, as you bring together different functions under a unified strategy, we talked about earlier, there's some friction, right? There's change management, right? You got to bring people along. So would be curious how you do that. How do you manage change, I guess is the question in the organization to bring everybody under one strategy?
Yeah. It's usually not easy, but I think the thing that's proven the most successful is tie it to the ultimate goal of where we're all trying to get to. So show them kind of the North Star where we're trying to get everybody aligned on that. And then you can't just communicate it at one time and expect they're going to absorb it, understand it, and move on. You got to have a relentless, continuous communication cycle, but more importantly than that, like communication with context, I think really matters. Helping them understand why we're making the change, why we're making it now, and how it's going to ultimately get us to that kind of North Star where we're all trending to. The context, I think, is what really matters, because just telling them we're all doing this and you're going to do it, that doesn't really fly, especially in this day and age. Yeah. So helping them get emotionally bought into the fact that they all feel like it's the right decision as well and they were part of the process is very helpful.
So last question for you before we go into lightning round. What haven't I asked you about a cohesive go-to-market strategy that I should have in today's conversation?
What should you have asked about?
Yeah, is there anything top of mind right now that we haven't covered that you'd want to share?
I would just say what's changed in the market in the last 12 months or post-COVID. I think the selling motion has definitely changed. Customers' willingness to engage has really changed. I know in our particular space, the competition has gotten more fierce. And so we're seeing not really an increase in losses, but an increase in the buying cycle, the number of buyers, and how much due diligence is put into the process. And it's, no matter how many times you ask, there's always surprises and things that come up that you didn't plan for. So it's challenging.
The last insight I'll leave us with is, at yesterday's conference, they presented a really interesting statistic, which is, and for the sake of the conversation, we'll just say a sales cycle is 12 months long. 9 months of that 12-month sales cycle, the buyer is deciding who they want to go with. They're not talking to sales. They're talking to their trusted peers. They're doing their own research. You may see them on the site doing some stuff, but they're unidentified, right? They're quiet. The last 3 months of the process is when they're validating their decisions of the short fit. So think about that from in the context of what you just said about being the market's changing. We want salespeople to drive meetings. We want people to build relationships, but yet what we're seeing is the buyer's journey has changed, and most of the time they're not ready to engage with you. And so that's a really hard dynamic, and certainly doesn't mean you can't reach out 100%. But I think understanding where people are in the journey and providing them with the right content, whether that be marketing content or the salesperson can be consultative and just say, help, here's what we're seeing, or here's what we can help you out with. It's just really different, I think, in the past year or two since COVID. So any thoughts on that?
100%. I mean, it was funny. I was at a partner event last night, and I was talking to an old coworker's wife, and she's like, "Oh, you're the CRO. You must do a lot of golfing." And I'm like, "Actually, I haven't golfed with a customer in years." She seemed shocked. Nobody has time to do that anymore. It's very hard to get like a VP or a CIO to go out golfing for 5 hours, during the workday these days. And so back to the conference you're at, like the ability to see intent of the buying community before they surface is even more important now than ever, because at least if you see that, you can market to them ahead of time with a more focused message and just shotgun approach, which is what it's been forever.
Yeah. All right, Jen, 2 questions. I know we're running tight on time, so I'm going to transition over the lightning round, and I'm going to narrow it down to 2 questions. 1, what is the favorite part of being a CRO?
Well, I personally like the people that I work with a lot, and we have a really good working relationship. It is work, but it's fun. I like that. Building your own team is great, and not just in sales, but all aspects of it is probably the most fun part about it.
Yep. And so when we opened up the episode, I'd asked you what made you excited about Druva. You said you always wanted to be a CRO. So I guess there's a flip side of the question I just asked you, which is, what's the hardest part of your job?
Yeah, well, just to be clear, I want to be a CRO, but I think we are also at an inflection point of cloud being just the new operating normal. And I think the platform here is so far superior to what I've seen in the past. That was obviously a big draw. And then your question was, what's the hardest part about the job?
Yeah.
Time management. Just finding time to do anything in your day, to stop and think about what do we need to do in 12 months, 18 months to get to that end goal. You get so pulled into the day-to-day minutia, you just have to push back, block off time in your calendar just to think and decompress, think strategically.
Yeah. Well, John, I think that the conversation today was really insightful. I appreciate you sharing everything with me and the audience. We'll let you get back to your day, so we'll wrap it up here. But again, thank you very much, and we'll speak soon.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.